And it's 1:30 p.m. right here in Lagos, Nigeria. Same time in London, same time in Marrakesh, Morocco. Time to bring you markets analysis and insights on Business Incorporated. Coming up on the program. Moody's downgrades credit rating of 5 major Egyptian banks to CAA1 and B3. International Energy Agency cuts forecast for growth in oil demand in 2024. Price of a dozen coconuts in Nigeria jumped over 90% in the last year. Welcome to the program. I'm Ladi Williams. Let's kick off with the markets now, starting with major equity markets in Africa. We'll see the NGX there. Not looking so bad at intraday, 0.04% marginal increase. And we see the South Africa GSE index, 0.18%, also in the green. Other markets we track, looking at North Africa for the EGX30, that's the biggest mover there, 1.67%. And Kenya closed negative, down 0.35%. Let's look at the Middle East now. We'll see Middle Eastern markets mostly red. Red is the color today. Abu Dhabi index down over 0.5%. Dubai index 0.61% down. Other markets we track in the Middle East, we see just the Qatari index in the green, up 0.33%, while Saudi Arabia stays in red, 0.34% at intraday. Now let's take it to Europe now. See, the European Union's foreign policy chief, Josep Borrell, has landed in China today to discuss EU-China strategy, including the de-risking aspects. China is the EU's largest trading partner, and Borrell will meet with Foreign Minister Wang Yi in a visit that's meant to last until Saturday. For more on this, we're joined by Wada Emran from Deutsche Welle in Berlin. Great to have you. What is likely to be on the EU's agenda for this meeting?
Thanks for having me, Ladi. Definitely, the two big leaders, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi and European Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell, will have a lot to discuss in this meeting. I think one of the more pressing things will obviously be their bilateral relation and global challenges being posed right now. This visit is another in a long list of high-level talks between the European bloc and China. The EU Foreign Policy Chief is also going to meet with different government officials, business representatives, and academics. I think this visit is also a way for the EU to keep dialogue open with Beijing. Since the Ukraine war, there have been times when Brussels probably wanted to just stop any kind of dialogue completely. But I think they have to be a bit cautious when dealing with China because they want to have safe distance, but also keep trading ties intact.
And how important is this visit with the current events unfolding?
Of course, as this visit comes when there is a full-scale conflict in the Middle Eastern region, I imagine this is a point of contention between the two. Josep Borrell had called together an emergency meeting of foreign ministers very recently to discuss this, while China, on the other hand, has had called on all parties to cease fire. So I think there's definitely tension between the bloc and China over geopolitical issues like this one. I mean, this on top of the fact that China also maintains a rather neutral stance on the Ukraine war, I imagine has irked the European bloc in terms of Beijing's policies. Of course, the Chinese Foreign Ministry welcomes this visit and the ensuing dialogue, they say, and want to address world peace and stability. But the outcome of these talks, we are yet to see.
Right, yet to see. Now let's turn briefly to the markets. Now, what are European investors looking at today?
Well, European stocks are having a good day, with 3-week highs after investors took comfort from the U.S. Federal Reserve and their rather dovish approach. The pan-European stocks 600 climbed by 0.6%, and this is good news. Oil prices are also falling for a third day after a surge at the start of the week after the conflict in the Middle Eastern region escalated. Many market players are following this very closely. Now, on a more global level, Tokyo stocks jumped today and a new Chinese policy boosted optimism. So Asian stocks are also seeing a rise.
Thank you so much. That was Wada Emran right there in Berlin, giving us the details from Europe. Now, moving on and bringing it right here back to Africa. We see it's day 4 of the IMF World Bank Annual Meeting at Marrakesh, Morocco, and we still have our team of reporters bringing us up to speed on proceedings. Today, an attendee joins us from Marrakesh, Dr. Bumi Bajamo, Head Group Corporate and Investment Banking at EcoBank. He's joining us right there in Marrakesh. Great to have you on the show.
Hi, Ladi. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Great to have you all the way from Marrakesh. What are some of the high points of the meetings you've attended so far?
Oh, fantastic. So we've had a lot of meetings. In terms of the highlights, number one was the session by the IMF President, Madam Georgina. The major theme part of that is that the world has gone through unprecedented crisis in terms of the global financial crisis. We had the Russian-Ukrainian crisis. We had COVID, coming from COVID. And then from the Russian crisis, you've had inflationary pressure and all of the attendant impact on global economy. What has come out strongly is that for the world to emerge from this global shock, especially from a developing country perspective, we will need global collaboration, economic integration. In place of fragmentation, we all need to come together to address the myriad of issues that is facing our world right now. Assuming we're able to pull together and unify ourselves, then we'll be able to command transformational growth. If all of the developed countries, the less developed countries come together, then it is projected by the expansion in global growth could be as high as about 8% over the next 4 years. So if you take the world's GDP of about $112 trillion, add 8% to it, that is the benefit of collaboration. In form of from collaboration, you also have the expansion in green energy initiative. The green energy, powering the green energy initiative will be the artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is both a source of risk and a sort of productive growth. If you are able to announce the opportunities in the green energy space in form of transformation, then you will be able to add an additional 3% to the world economic growth. But all of this will only happen in place of collaboration. If there is no collaboration, and what you've seen in recent years is that in place of collaboration, you've seen a lot of economic fragmentation. We're talking about trade facilitation measure, but rather than having trade facilitation measure, you are having trade restriction. According to the IMF president, from the 2017 till now, over a 5-year period, you've had a number of trade restrictions, moving from about 500 trade restrictions to over 3,000. 3,000 in the space of 5 years, when we are talking about boosting integration and all of those, is not good for our world. If we are not able to address that, then it means that due to fragmentation, due to disintegration, rather than pulling together, then remove the economy of like Japan, which is the third economy in the world with their 4 trillion GDP, then add Germany to that, which is another 4 billion, remove about 8.3 trillion from the world economy. That is the impact of disintegration. But if we're able to pull together, then we address the issue facing the world right now, which is high inflationary pressure, balance of payment crisis from budgetary issues, and then the long-term one, which is decelerating growth, slow growth. Another highlight for me was the WEO presentation, which is the World Economic Outlook. From the World Economic Outlook, you've seen that the projected GDP growth for the world is just about 3% for this year, and then 2.9% for last year. That is the lowest it's been since 2001, except during the global financial crisis.
Right.
It's the lowest it has been, but we can turn all of those around if the developing economy are able to help the emerging economy as well as the less developing economy to come out of the present crisis that they have right now. If we do not do that, then you have a number of countries in Africa where they are supposed to be resource rich, but they are not able to harness the value chain. What will leapfrog the world into the next level of growth is for us to be able to address the supply chain cohesion and integration.
All right, Dr.
Ability to enhance the supply chain network will mean that African economy, who are the major supplier of raw material that are needed even to power the green energy initiative, can then begin to harness the benefit of the resources they have. So it then means that resources can move freely from the south to the north. The north is where the concentration of capital is right now, but the south is where the youthful population and all of the materials.
All right, Dr. Badjomo.
Help the south to develop. Yes, please.
Yeah, Dr. Badjomo, I love the energy, you know, right there. I can feel the energy, you know, from you and your environment right there. But I'm sure that there are a lot of conversations, you know, about participation of private sector in dealing with debt issues in Africa. Bring me up to speed on some of those conversations.
Okay, thank you. So in terms of the current issue, like I said, the major issue focused on affecting the less developed economy or the developing economy is the issue of debt crisis. What you have is that each country individually goes to look for financing. What we are saying is that in terms of moving forward, in terms of boosting integration, we need to empower the financial institution in developing economies, because you need to support the private sector. You can only support the private sector if there's financing available. If there's financing available, then they can produce more, enhance the value chain, and be able to increase their outputs to the world. So what you need to do is that by ourselves, because of all of the rating issues that we have, because of our imperfection and all of the budgetary issues that we have now, there is limited fiscal space for African countries. So the only way you can do is to boost financing to this economy by empowering the private sector financial institutions, as well as the African-focused developmental institutions like the AFDB, the Afrexim, who are powering African trade. But if you do not do that, it means that the African economy individually will go and then they will not be able to command commensurate return. Then the high cost of debt will continue to impoverish them, because high cost of debt means high cost of financing, high cost of production, and their inability to compete effectively. So if we are able to empower the developmental institution, then you help them. Another thing is also the issue of rating agency. If you were at the session with Mr. Mo Ibrahim yesterday, he was talking about the perception of rating agency and how it impacts ability of African countries to be able to borrow internationally. And you know, that is true, because if you remember the Kenya situation, Kenya said they wanted to fast track the repayment of their debt from 2004 to 2003. That led to negative downgrade for Kenya. So, you know, then you're saying they are hasty, because the government is saying, it's willing buyer, willing seller principle, but you have downgraded them already. And because of that, the projected 50% reduction in Kenya's debt did not materialize, because the government has to pull back. You have a number of African countries that are in debt crisis right now. Of all of the people in debt crisis, about 8 African countries. You have Ghana, who has just gone through the IMF staff framework. You have Zambia, you have Sri Lanka, you have Lebanon with their debt to GDP of well above 500,000%. You have Kenya with debt to GDP ratio of 60. You have Ghana, where the interest service to revenue is well above 113%. So except the world collaborates and help this economy, it will be difficult. But the good thing is that they are receiving the help, and that's why you see that all of the reception that was projected have not materialized. So we're not in insolvency state. There's no solvency crisis, because they have been backstopped for each of these 7 economies that are going through significant debt crisis. The challenge is, how do we ensure not many more people or many more countries will fall into that debt trap or debt situation, so that we can mitigate instability going forward. Okay,
thank you so much, Dr. Badjomo. Definitely, we don't want the kiss of debt on any African country as we move ahead. Thank you so much, Dr. Bumi Badjomo, Head, Group Corporate and Investment Banking at EcoBank. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye. See you.
Bye-bye. All right, we'll take a break now. When we come back, Commodities Market Update is next. Do stay with us. All right, for commodities market update now, we're going to be looking at some major commodities right here, and that's an interesting one. Now, we're going to be looking at the movement and price of coconuts. There we'll see the price of a dozen coconuts in Nigeria jumped by over 90% in the last year to 7,000 naira. And given that coconut is widely known for its uses in culinary, cosmetics, and even pharmaceutical industries. And let's talk to Fumi Adebowale now, manager FDC, to tell us why the price is rising so high. Great to have you on the show.
Yeah, so good afternoon.
Good afternoon. So
I can mention the price of coconuts surged by over 90%, and that is huge. And that is because what the country is producing currently, it is inadequate to meet growing demand. Currently, Nigeria is producing less than 300,000 metric tons of coconuts, and that is low compared to what the demand for this commodity is actually. And if you look at the factors that are actually contributing to this, one of those factors is the fact that farmers are using low-yield seedlings. So currently, especially small-scale farmers, they are using beginning tall seedling, which takes about, I think, 9 to 15 years for it to begin to fruit. And the yield on this seedling is not as high as the hybrid seedling that is used in the top producing country. So that is actually limiting production. Meanwhile, the demand for coconut has increased sharply in the last decade, and that's because coconut is widely used by a number of industries, particularly the pharmaceutical industry, food and beverages, cosmetics, and the likes. So with the increase in the price of coconut, we expect that the price of the byproducts or the derivatives will increase, and that will have significant implications for households and businesses. So for businesses, the ability to actually transfer the increase in price to consumers depends on how price sensitive the end users are, which are the consumers. So if they're able to pass it on to them, fine. But that will mean that if consumers should respond by reducing the quantity they demand from them, definitely businesses too will reduce their demand for coconut, and that will weigh on the performance of the industries that rely on this commodity.
Now, looking at production of coconuts, now we see Nigeria has the perfect climate for growing coconuts, but yet to import about 70%, mostly from Ghana and Ivory Coast, to meet local demand. What are the factors undermining the country's potential, and how will this shortfall in domestic supply, how will that be met? We've been clamoring to be self-sufficient in coconut production.
So coconut can be produced in virtually all states in Nigeria, but what we are seeing currently is that Lagos State is the highest producer of coconut. It accounts for about 70% of total production. And like I mentioned earlier, one of the factors that is limiting the potential in the production of coconut is the low-yield seedling that is being used by farmers. So most of these small-scale farmers cannot afford the hybrid seedling that is used for commercial production. And this is it is important that for us to maximize the potential and to increase production and maximize potential of this commodity, there has to be investment in the hybrid seedling, and that might mean that there is need for support, from the government to be able to attain this height. If that happens, it is good one for the country in the sense that the production of coconut can be increased to a level whereby 100% of local demand will be met, and there is also surplus to be exported. If this happens, what that means is that, number one, the dollar that will be demanded to import coconuts will be reduced, and that is cost savings for the government. And if they also increase exports, it means there will be additional dollar inflow into the country. That would be a good one for the country, looking at the fact that the currency has been under pressure for some months now. So it's going to help in reducing the pressure on the currency. There will be increase in gross external reserves, and Nigeria's trade balance will definitely improve.
We need more dollar inflow, at this time. Let's look at other countries now. See, Indonesia, they produce about 17 million metric tons. Philippines, 14 million. India is also big there. They're currently the largest producers of coconuts globally, accounting for 70% of global exports. You see Sri Lanka and Vietnam also on that list. But in Africa, we just have Ghana with 507 million metric tons, about 507,000. So why do these countries have so much advantage, when it comes to, producing on a global scale?
look at the countries that you mentioned now, one thing is common to them. They are mostly countries in the Asia-Pacific region, so they have favorable weather. But apart from this, the hybrid seedling, which is used for commercial production, is what the farmers are actually using, and that is having a positive impact on the output of coconut in these countries. But we're also seeing some countries in West Africa also using this using the hybrid seedling, and one of them is Ghana. Ghana is currently using that, and that is with the help of the government and some other authorities. You know, I think in June 2020, about 400,000 seedlings were distributed to farmers, and that in a way helped to reduce the cost burden on farmers and also increase the country's production. Currently, Ghana is one of the 10 top producing coconuts, one of the top 10 countries producing coconut in the world, and compared to 2017 when it was ranked 14th largest producer in the world. So I think this is where Nigeria can learn. Nigeria can learn from this. There's a for intervention to be able to assist farmers to increase production. And when that happens, like I mentioned earlier, it's going to be a win-win situation whereby farmers will win. The country will also, as a whole, will also benefit in terms of increased dollar inflows and reduction in currency pressures.
All right, for me, I am definitely looking for that one commodity that I can say, okay, Nigeria produces enough of, and we're actually benefiting from. I'm looking for that commodity. Thank you so much, Fumi Adebowale, Manager, Financial Derivatives Company. Thank you. All right, let's look at all the stories now. See, major credit rating agency Moody's have downgraded the ratings of 5 key Egyptian state-owned and private banks to Caa1 and B3. Moody's downgraded the state-owned National Bank of Egypt, Bank MISR, and Bank du Caire to Caa1 from B3. And the credit rating agency also downgraded Commercial International Bank, the largest private bank in Egypt, to Caa1 from B3. Moreover, Moody's downgraded the Bank of Alexandria to B3 from B2. Italian banking group Intesa San Paolo owns about 80% of the bank, and the Egyptian government owns about another 20%. And the United Nations has urged Zimbabwe to implement necessary changes to attract foreign direct investment as global foreign assistance diminishes, moving away from quiet diplomacy. The advice follows a plea from George Guvamatanga, the Finance, Economic Development and Investment Promotion Permanent Secretary, for support from development partners to secure additional funding. The decline in foreign development support has left Zimbabwe with limited access to fresh capital due to its debt overhang, and reduction in such support could have a detrimental impact on their economy. And now let's take a look at what's happening with the global oil market. We see the International Energy Agency today lowered its forecast for growth in oil demand in 2024, suggesting harsher global economic conditions and progress on energy efficiency will weigh on consumption. In its monthly report, the IEA forecast demand for oil will rise by 880,000 barrels per day in 2024, down from its previous forecast of 1 million barrels per day based on broader economic concerns and a faster adoption of electric vehicles, among other energy efficiency measures. And for the prices now, we see Brent futures rose about $1, about 1.20% to $86.83 a barrel, while U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude gained 73 cents, about 0.90% to $84.22 a barrel. Different from what we had definitely this morning. Let's look at the metals market now. We see gold extended gains to a 2-week high today as the dollar and treasury yields tick down on the Federal Reserve's cautious tilt in tone ahead of its U.S. inflation prints that could offer further rate cues. Spot gold rose by 0.4% to $1,881 per ounce, its highest level since September 27th, while U.S. gold futures were up by 0.4% to $1,894. Gold prices have appreciated on the back of a decline in yields and a more dovish tone from some Fed members and an element of safe haven buying. That's according to analysts. And that's the show today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Ladi Williams. I'll catch you again tomorrow. Bye for now.